Hey guys, so we are talking about cellular respiration today. So from this, what you want to be able to do is show on a model that cellular respiration is a chemical process where the bonds in sugars, such as glucose that we talked about in photosynthesis, are broken and new compounds are formed making usable energy, otherwise ATP, for the cell. So, cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is the process that releases energy from food in the presence of oxygen. This has three steps: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. Glucose must go through to be turned into usable energy. Okay, so what goes into cellular respiration? Okay, so our reactants are glucose and oxygen. When we combine our glucose and oxygen, we are able to go through and get our products of water, carbon dioxide, and ATP. So, ATP, if you guys don't remember, is the energy that is usable by the body. So, ATP is super important. So, the whole point of cellular respiration is to make ATP. Water and carbon dioxide aren't our products, but they aren't the purpose of why this is happening. So these often get referred to as waste products. So this is what happens when your body exhales, it releases water and carbon dioxide. You may know that when you breathe out, you release carbon dioxide, but you may be like, well, water? Yes, take a glass from your kitchen, breathe on it heavy. The steam that gets stuck on that, it's water. That's how the water gets released. Okay, so what uses cellular respiration? All living things use cellular respiration, even plants. Just because plants go through photosynthesis doesn't mean that they don't go through cellular respiration. Plants do go through cellular respiration. Living things go through cellular respiration. Plants, they can make their own food through photosynthesis, and animals have to eat other living things for food. But both use cellular respiration to turn the glucose that they are obtaining into ATP energy. So there are three steps of cellular respiration. So two of the three steps occur in the mitochondria. And if you remember, our mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell because this is where we're making ATP. Okay, so our first step is glycolysis. So this occurs out in the cell membrane. So this requires only 2 ATP to get started. This turns 1 glucose into 2 pyruvic acids. This ends up making 4 ATP, so a total of 2 additional ATP and 2 NADH. Okay? So this requires no oxygen and can supply the body with energy when no oxygen is present. Okay? So if you've heard of something called anaerobic respiration, this is glycolysis. So some organisms can actually live without oxygen going through anaerobic respiration without the presence of oxygen there. A good example of this is yeast. So, yeast is something that can live without the presence of oxygen and move on forward. So, let's get on to our next steps. So, from there, we have the Krebs cycle. So, the Krebs cycle occurs in the mitochondrial matrix, which is the wavy innermost layers. This actually does require oxygen. So, with the pyruvic acid, it's broken down into carbon dioxide in a series of energy extracting reactions. So the pyruvic acid is turned to acetyl coenzyme A and then is transformed into citric acid. Citric acid is then turned into many of the important electron carriers like NADH and FADH2. This produces 2 ATP, 6 NADH, 2 FAD, and carbon dioxide as a waste. Okay. Our third step is our electron transport chain. This requires oxygen once again. This occurs in the mitochondria as well. So this uses all the NADH and FADH, these electron carriers from our second step with the Krebs cycle and from glycolysis and the Krebs cycle to convert ADP into ATP. ADP, if you remember, is adenosine diphosphate, the unenergized version, and ATP is adenosine triphosphate, the energized version. The ATP synthases in the electron transport chain grab ADP and add a phosphate, producing ATP. At the end of the electron transport chain, we are able to produce 32 ATP and water as a waste product. So if we're looking through this, we have our first step out here. We have our glycolysis happening outside of our cell. So here we make our 2-pyruvate, okay, which can turn into our acetyl-CoA. We only get 2 ATP out of this first step. Over here, which turns into our NADH and FADH. Over here, we have our Krebs cycle. Inside of our mitochondria, this is what this structure is. And with our Krebs cycle, we once again only get 2, but we get more NADH and FADH, which are our electron carriers. And finally, we have our final end process, which is our electron transport chain. And here we make 32 ATP. So on average, we have about 36 to 38 ATP being produced by cellular respiration. Okay,